This is a special and important time for Europe, for America, and for the world. After more than 3 years of a devastating war in Ukraine, there is hope for peace. It was given by Donald Trump, along with the new American administration. The ceasefire in Eastern Europe is the #1 topic, but not the only one at the Munich Security Conference.
But while the Trump administration is very concerned with European security and believes that we can come to a reasonable settlement between Russia and Ukraine, and we also believe that it's important in the coming years for Europe to step up in a big way to provide for its own defense.
U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance leaves no illusions. Enough of the bloodshed, the killing of innocent victims, the suffering of civilians, the destruction of cities. It's time to cease fire and sit down at the negotiating table immediately. But the American leader also spoke about the crisis of values that has caught up with Europe, calling it a grave threat. It's worth listening to J.D. Vance.
What I worry about is the threat from within, the retreat of Europe from some of its most fundamental values, values shared with the United States of America. So I come here today not just with an observation, but with an offer. And just as the Biden administration seemed desperate to silence people for speaking their minds, so the Trump administration will do precisely the opposite, and I hope that we can work together on that. In Washington, there is a new sheriff in town, and under Donald Trump's leadership, we may disagree with your views, but we will fight to defend your right to offer it in the public square, agree or disagree.
J.D. Vance also drew attention to a fundamental value of democracy, freedom of speech, which is being attempted to be violated today in many European countries, including Poland, as TV Republica also experiences on a daily basis.
Across Europe, free speech, I fear, is in retreat. And in the interest of comedy, my friends, but also in the interest of truth, I will admit that sometimes the loudest voices for censorship have come not from within Europe, but from within my own country, where the prior administration threatened and bullied social media companies to censor so-called misinformation.
A total of more than 60 world leaders will attend the Munich meeting over 3 days. So there are different ideas for ending the war. The European Union wants a bigger and more privileged role for Ukraine.
We're working with Ukraine on their EU accession because Ukraine is part of our European family, and this is where their future lies, here in Europe.
1 week ahead of German elections.
But neither Brussels officials nor Western leaders have been able to stop Putin's criminal attacks. The American administration has a slightly different view of the world than we do, which does not mean a threat to partnership or trust. We have to accept that and work together. But if anyone thinks the Americans will leave Ukraine without support, they should listen to the words of J.D. Vance, who gave an interview to the Wall Street Journal. If Putin does not accept the peace plan, he will bitterly regret it. There are economic tools of leverage, and there are, of course, military tools of leverage. He added that the option of sending U.S. troops to Ukraine remains on the table.
The order is United States, Europe, then Russia. Be ready to this meeting. That is the first. We are not against everything, but we are supporting this.
NATO, led by the Americans, does not intend to wait until new threats emerge. The basis is strengthening the alliance and closing ranks, something that resonated strongly at the Munich conference.
Invest much more. Several announced large increases in spending in today's meeting. And I expect many ministers to return home from today's meeting with an even greater sense of urgency.
The U.S. Vice President made it clear the U.S. will support Europe, but it is necessary for Europe to return to fundamental values like security, family, economy. So the first day of the Munich Security Conference was like a cold shower for many countries, especially Western Europe, now wrapped up in left-liberal ideology.
Pope John Paul II, in my view, one of the most extraordinary champions of democracy on this continent or any other, once said, "Do not be afraid." We shouldn't be afraid of our people, even when they express views that disagree with their leadership. Thank you all. Good luck to all of you. God bless you.
German prosecutors, who are usually very cautious when speaking about the Islamist motivation of an Afghan attacker who drove into a crowd in Munich, injuring dozens of people. Yesterday's event sparked another wave of criticism of the country's migration policy, with politicians calling for a break with Angela Merkel's tradition and tighter regulations after the elections. It was another atrocious act, completely incomprehensible to the civilized world. Farhad N., a 24-year-old Afghan, drove his car deliberately into a crowd of demonstrators in Munich. We currently have knowledge of 36 injured people. 2 people, including a child, are in critical condition. The condition of the others is described as severe or moderate. We already know that he was guided by Islamic fundamentalism in his actions. It is safe to say, based on everything we know so far, that the motive for the crime was Islamic jihadist ideology. As I said, this is the current state and assessment of what we have seen, read, and what the perpetrator has told us. After committing the crime, the Afghan man addressed police officers with the words, Allahu Akbar. He admitted that he deliberately drove into the demonstrators. We also reached a transcript of a conversation with a relative in which he said goodbye with the words, maybe tomorrow I will be gone. The terrorist attack came just hours before world leaders arrived in Munich for an international security conference. Chancellor Olaf Scholz expressed his outrage at the attack and promised the swift deportation of the suspect to his home country. This is something we can neither tolerate nor accept. Anyone who commits crimes in Germany will not only be severely punished and imprisoned, he or she must also face the fact that they will not be allowed to continue their stay in Germany. German President Frank-Walter Steinmeier, who as head of the foreign ministry together with Chancellor Angela Merkel implemented the Willkommen policy, also appeared at the scene of the tragedy. Now Germany experiences a horror every few weeks and then openly talks about the failure of the open door policy. The Prime Minister of Bavaria can speak of a déjà vu, as a dozen days ago, after the attack of the Afghan knife man, he assured the following.
Es reicht. Es reicht.
Enough is enough. Enough of this. How many more? Mannheim, Solingen, Magdeburg, Aschaffenburg. Where to now? Migration is overwhelming our country, and not just financially. Of course we are a humanitarian country, but ultimately it can't be at the expense of our own population. Our motto must be security first. Farhad N. arrived in Germany in 2016 from Afghanistan via Italy. He arrived to Calabria on a dinghy. The Germans enabled him to live comfortably, and he repaid them with fear, pain, and suffering. And now a story that a man will certainly not forget for the rest of his life. A Venezuelan kayaker experienced a real moment of horror during a trip off the Chilean coast of Patagonia. Swimming in the ocean waters, he suddenly found himself in the mouth of a whale. The entire incident was captured on video by his father. Both shared their experience. What does a man who finds himself in such a situation think about? It was supposed to be an eventful day, and it undoubtedly was. However, the encounter with the whale certainly exceeded all expectations of the Venezuelan kayakers. Adrian Simancas, 24, fell right into the mouth of the huge animal. At first, I thought I had died. I was terrified because I thought I couldn't do anything. The whale submerged for a few seconds, then decided to spit out the kayaker. When I managed to get out and start drifting, I was afraid that something would happen to my dad as well, that we wouldn't reach shore in time. Adrian's father, although extremely panicked at first, managed to keep his cool. He calmed and instructed his son and managed to capture the entire situation. When I turned around, I didn't see Adrian and his boat. I was shocked and worried. I noticed him surfacing, and right behind him the boat also surfaced. Later, a whale appeared. The man was not hurt. Interestingly, in such a situation, it is not only one's whole life that comes before one's eyes. It is said that there is also time for other thoughts. I thought it was an orca. We had talked about orcas shortly before the incident, so I had it in my head. But when I surfaced, I realized it was a whale. Needless to say, he was also very lucky. Neither the kayak nor the Kayaker stood in the whale's way.